Hello everyone, how are we all? Can we all hear me and see me okay? The picture looks okay to me. Oh, I'm just having a bit of a hot flush, bear with me a second. It's a little bit warm. The sun's decided to come out here. Right, let's check. Are we? Oh yeah, it looks like we're live on Facebook, which is perfect. Jolly good. Let's see. How is everyone? Yes, loud and clear. Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Rebecca. That's good to know. Okay, let's have a see who we've got with us. We have Lorraine. Hi, Lorraine. How are you? Hi, Kathy and Patricia. Hello, Mum. How's you? And we have Tony from Long Island. Hello there, Tony. Lovely to have you here again. And we have Tonya from Florence in Kentucky. Wow, I don't remember seeing your name before, so it's lovely to have you here also. Oh, goodness gracious, Kathy. Oh, are you recovering at home? Well, let's see if we can help you forget about that for a little bit. And I'll come up with sit back and watch me do some stenciling. Hopefully that will chill you out a little bit and give you some ideas. I've got a man's card for us today to try and do. Obviously it's not exclusively to be a man's card, but I know it's nice to have ideas for them, and say depending on the colour that you make this, then it can be for anyone actually. So we've got Jill and Mary and Jean, Andrea, Sharon, Jodie, loads of people. Lots and lots of people. Who else? And Janet. You've ordered this out. Oh, you've ordered the pencils, have you, Janet? Oh, hi, Helen. Lovely to have you all here. Yes, if I don't know who else has ordered this, but if you've seen all the design team samples, are absolutely brilliant, aren't they? Absolutely stunning. There is so much that you can do with this. And I say all the design team samples, I've just got one idea for you here again today. It's ideal to use as a guy's card. But as I say, there's so many sort of different connotations of this that you could make. It's a simple, straightforward, it's not shaped card or anything. And we're using some old favourites as well. So it's, as I say, with all of Lisa's new stuff that she brings out, there is always something in the back catalogue that you'll be able to pair it with and come up with new ideas, whether it be your nesting dies, or some of the other stencils, floral stencils, some of the stamps with cute animals. There's always a way to pair this. So this is what we will be making today. Again, I'm using the pencil crayons. So we have the layering stencils with the die in one packet here in the envelope, and then we have the 3D embossing folder here, and it's a 6x6 set, but obviously it can always be cut down. As you can see, I'm not using this as a whole at all. I'm just using just a section of the design today, which just makes a massive impact on a small A6 size card. So the other favourites that I'm using with this today, which I thought is a really nice way to reintroduce them to you in case you haven't seen them before, in case you're new to Lisa, and I know she's getting new viewers all the time, and there may well be a new influx next week as well once she makes her debut on Hobby Maker. But it's really nice to come back to this set, the Layering Twisted Stripes. This is a set of 5 stencils. Everything I'm actually using as well is in stock today, which is really good news. So it's really nice to be able to show you how to use this. I've done it monochrome. This is it? No, actually, tell a lie, it's 2 inks, but the majority of this card is made with just the 1 ink, the Surf's Up. I've added a little bit of Deep Ocean, and I don't know if you can see, let's just hold this up a little bit closer. There's some really thin lines in here, and I've been able to use my fine liner pens from Lisa as well. Now, I'm using Lisa's ones because it's a set of 24, and we've got pretty much every colour in there to match all the inks, but any fine liner will work, whether it be black or even a biro, a pencil would work. Then obviously to help in the making of this shirt, I've used the nested pocket builder, which again just works perfectly for this, for the little pocket that we have here, and of course all the die cut buttons. And for the sentiment, just a lovely simple sort of bold sentiment, I've used the shadowed words. It's a set of stamps and dies. You have something here for every occasion, and which I thought was quite fitting for this card, because you could also use this as Father's Day. You can add Father's Day, but we've got well done, we've got congratulations, we've got a get well soon, we've got a thank you. So it's a really nice fun font as well to use for the guys cards. Let's just hold that there for you, if that's showing up quite well. So yeah, lots of different techniques today. So it's basically quite a simple card to put together, but there's a lot of stenciling involved. So let's get going. What I've got, I've put the list of everything that I've used here and all the item numbers. I will definitely put that in the little description under the YouTube video as well, so you'll have that for future reference, and if I remember I'll put it up at the end of the video as well. I've also got another slide here which I'll just pop up for you just for the dimensions. It's a 6x6, well sorry, it's an A6 card blank, so I've given you the dimensions there in both centimeters and inches. And I've given you the dimensions for the collar as well. Now, what I didn't do is give you the dimensions for the actual layer of the shirt fold, but it would be just a little bit smaller than the card. So let me measure that for you now, because the shirt collar actually is dependent on the size here, but I'll show you how to sort of marry that up and how to sort of fit that, because this can easily be scaled up or scaled down in size. So the actual layer of the shirt that I'm using is 10 centimeters wide by 14.3 centimeters. So that's the actual layer of the shirt, but we'll come on to that in a second. So I've got 2 lots of layering stenciling to do. I've got the layering get my teeth in today. I've got the stenciling of the pencils and I have the stenciling of the shirt. Now I'm doing the pencils today as they are just graphite lead pencils, as they were, just a standard sort of builder's pencil, as it were, because they contrast really well with the colour of the shirt that I'm making. Again, this is totally up to you. You can have fun and make a whole set of coloured pencils. Say, if there's loads of samples in the design team to sort of show you how, all the different colourways, but I've just used like workman's pencils. That was sort of the idea that I was going for with this. And you want something that's going to contrast. So if you're going to do a red shirt, then maybe you could do blue pencils or something like that as well. So that was my thinking behind that. So I'm just going to get my stencils for the pencils. So that's, well, the pencil crayons is what the name of the collection is called. So I'm just going to take those stencils out, and we shall get going with these first. Let's leave those sitting there. And you can see actually on Lisa's packaging here that we have a lovely array of coloured pencils. So you can really go to town, and it's so easy. And you'll see as the stencils go along, and I'll sort of point it out to you, it's so easy to be able to colour match or do the pencils in lots of different colours. So I'm using an off-white card today, and it's slightly a pearlescent card. It gives me a really nice contrast with the colours that I'm using on the shirt, as opposed to it being stark white. It's not actually showing up that well for you on the video there, but maybe if you can see the difference there. It's when I put a white card against it. I thought the cream just worked nicer with the background of the shirt there. So the layering stencils for the pencils, we have a set of 7. Now again, depending on how many you want to stencil, you might only want to use a couple of them at a time, or you may want to do the whole lot and then cut them down in size. What I've done here, these are the ones that I've already cut, but I cut them out of the rest of the ones that I've already stenciled. So I did stencil the whole lot, and I've just cut them down to size for the ones that would fit in the pocket. So I can leave these to sit in the packet, and I can use them for another card later on. So let's get stenciling, because that's the fun part of doing this. Okay, so we've got stencil number 1, and what we, you can't quite see that, but what you can see initially, what you do, you stencil the barrel of the pencils and the actual tip of the pencils, the colouring lead of that. So it's so easy to match the barrel of the pencil with the colour it is. So if you wanted to do a set of coloured pencils like Lisa's done here, you actually do the barrel of the pencil at the same time as the lead as well. So there's no sort of swapping and changing. It really is quite straightforward to do. But what I'm doing like a builder's pencil style. So I'm going to be using rusty nails. And you'll notice that I didn't put any colours on this, because this really is something that is just entirely up to you. You can probably pick any colour for this and it would work, but I found that rusty nails is a really nice orangey browny colour, which I can sort of vary the colour as I go along, just to add a little bit of variation. So I'm coming in with rusty nails. I'm going to not necessarily worry too much about it being a perfect blend on the pencil, because we know workman's tools don't stay clean for very long. It's nice to add just that little bit of variation. There always is. Now I'm not doing the tips on these, because what I want to do is make these to actually be graphite pencils. So what I am going to do is bring in the anthracite here on my little brush, and once I've done the barrel of the pencils, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to do the tips of the pencils like that. Now again, if you were doing coloured pencils, you would then match them to the barrel if that's what you wanted to do. And you see already that is just so effective, and we can carry on and do the same all the way through with all of the stencils, and it builds up to be to get your image really quite quickly. So although these are layering stencils, what you're actually doing is stacking the pencils as you go along, as opposed to layering details on top of already stenciled areas, which is possibly what we're used to doing when we use Lisa's stencils. But this is just taking it in a slightly different direction to actually build up an image, which is just really fun to do actually. So that's stencil number 2. Now, that's because I didn't clean my stencils properly and I've got a little bit of transference coming off there, but that's fine. We're not going to actually be, well, you can't see that on there, but I've got a little bit of transference of ink there. So now what I will say, when you actually add these stencils down, you can see there is just a real super slight little bit of movement, and if I don't line this up, you will end up with a little bit of a gap on the left hand side of the pencils, and you'll be overlapping on the right hand side, which is fine if that's what you want to do with all of the stencils, but just make sure that tiny little bit of movement, it means that just make sure that the stencils are sitting in the same, or the same position as you go through the stencil layers. I'm just going to make sure that that tiny bit of movement of that stencil, it really is only a millimetre or 2, but it can make the difference. I'm just going to make sure that that little bit of movement is actually sitting towards the left. If I swapped and make sure that little bit of movement was off to the right, then everything would change and all the lining up. And this is actually a good tip going forward with all of your stencils. Just make sure that that little bit of movement, you're being consistent with which way you set that stencil. You're going to have that little bit of movement because you need to have that little bit of leeway to actually pop the stencils onto the peg system there. So that is nothing that we can actually avoid, but you just I know sometimes there's been a few questions where people have said they've struggled with the alignment of certain things, and it could just be that slight little bit of movement. Actually, you can see it there now that I've stenciled a little bit. Yeah, just make sure that you are consistent in where you place your stencil, and that might help with some of the alignment, particularly when you're doing like the floral stencils and things. It's not so urgent in this particular design. So I'm going to put the tips on the pencils there, and you can see now, if you wanted, if this was all, you only wanted a small section of pencils, then I would say you could just absolutely jump to the last stencil to actually put to fill in between the tip and the barrel, which is the last stencil, and you could just leave it at that if you wanted to. You don't necessarily need to do the whole lot if you're planning on only using a section of the design here. But I'm going across, and to say I'm actually doing these all the same colour, but what I'm trying to do each time I put a new stencil down, I'm just going to just vary a little bit the amount of ink that I'm putting through. So even though I'm using the same colour, I'm just going to sort of make sure that some stencils I put the ink through a little bit heavier than others, or perhaps lighter than others. So there's a little bit of variation between each of the pencils that are stacked next to each other. And when I take this one away, you'll just see that difference that I'm talking about there. You can see that they're not necessarily uniform like so. Now, if you were to take off and just ignore those pencil tips and not stencil those, these could actually be skyscrapers as well, couldn't they? If you do them, I did actually stencil this on a black. So if this was the opaque white ink onto black cardstock. So ignore the pencil tips there. This could actually be like a skyline, couldn't it? With lots and lots of skyscrapers in the background at night. That could work. And then possibly you could put that with a starry background in the back, or some sort of Christmas or festive greeting over the top, or with a moon. So that's another idea that you could use as well. Always try and think of different ways that you can use your stencils, and say I'm pretty sure you'll get an awful lot a lot more ideas when you look at the design team samples. I think Donna done one where she literally just die cut, just used the die and die cut and layered it so it was just the shapes of the pencils, but it didn't take on a pencil form at all. It was really clever, and I think she'd done it in pinks and creams. It was stunning. It was a lovely, lovely card, and so totally different to everything else that we've done, or that anybody else has done. So what I'm using here is just really quite straightforward, but you can see, because how these apertures are actually spaced, that it would be so easy to add different colours. Now I'll just show you that. If I come in with a stencil brush, let's say I wanted to do this pencil in a completely different colour. It's so easy just to change that, and you're not affecting the other pencils that are either side. You've actually got the space to add a bit of originality to each of the individual pencils, like so, which again is important. And if you were wanting to do this with different colours, then that makes your life an awful lot easier. And even this one, they're not quite as spaced, but there is enough space in between to fit a stencil brush and give you the chance again to do that a completely different colour. Maybe just while I'm here, I'll just show you that. Let's deviate from what I'm doing a little bit. Let's stencil these in the brown to start with. Like so. And I've actually got a red ink here. I've got Jingleberry, and I've got my stencil brushes. So I'll just show you how easy it is just to change that up and add extra colour to individual pencils, like so. That should show up and register as a completely different colour there. So let me do the tips as well. And actually what I will do, let's make that into a coloured pencil completely, just to show you the difference. Okay, so there we are. We have the one red pencil in there. So even that in itself is just a really nice accent. So you could just have a coloured pencil amongst all the rest of them sitting there as well. But say it really is so easy to make in each one of these pencils individual. Now the last stencil, you can see how quickly this has come together. The last stencil, stencil number 7, is actually filling in the wooden barrel of the pencil there. Right, what I'm going to do, where's my pen? So I'm just going to use the rusty nails and just go over really, really gently. Now, obviously, I don't want this to blend in with the barrel of the rest of the pencils, but I do want it to have a little bit of colour. So I'm just using what is left on my brush just to connect those two areas that I've stenciled together. And you can see now actually how that has really pulled the whole image together. So I can lift that off now and just raise it up, and I can just show you just how that comes together. It's a really fun stencil actually. So I think those of you that have ordered it, I think you're really going to enjoy using it. There is so many different things to do with it, and I think it might be just one if you don't even have a card in mind to make. It's a really nice one just to sit and stencil and just sort of get you used to stenciling, or sort of ease you back into it if you've perhaps lost your mojo a little bit and you're not quite sure what to make. I'm just looking for the die now. There we are. So the die comes in with the layering stencils. So we can see we could leave this as is. We could trim this down to be a 6x6 size card, and you don't need to die cut it at all. We don't necessarily even need to emboss. So you could just trim this down to size. Let's show you how that will look. And it's such an effective design in itself. Again, you really don't need to do a huge amount. Let's see, that is 5. So trim that to size. That's now squared off, and you could just put that on the front of a card with a sentiment, and you're good to go. So say in itself it is a perfect image just to stencil. Now we can layer up our die. I'm just going to die cut this for you so we can use these on our shirt, and then we can get stenciling with the and putting our shirt card together. So I am going to tape that down into place. I'll just go ahead and die cut that for you. Okie doke. Right, let's just bring up your chat there. Okay. Oh, hi Cheryl. Oh, not to worry, you know you can watch it on replay. Okay, so let's take that off. Put that to one side. I'm going to pop that in there before I lose it. Okay, so there we have our die cut. Again, that can be just popped onto a card itself and layered with a sentiment, and that gives you an easy card. Also a really nice for teachers' cards, you know, something really quick and easy, the ideal one and really fun one for the kids to get involved with as well. So just looking for my embossing folder. So I will emboss this quickly. Again, once these are stenciled, it's so easy to line up in your embossing folder. Get that all in place. We can emboss that. Okay, so now though we have that embossed, and that gives us a nice lot of dimension, so it really brings those pencils to life and gives them that 3D effect. So now we have those ready, we are then ready to move on to stenciling our shirt. Now I was wondering, I might try a different colourway this time. Now, this card I've used Surf's Up with a tiny little bit of Deep Ocean on there to get that really lovely checked look. But what I thought I might do this time is use the Deep Ocean, so we go a little bit darker on the blue, and I'm going to use perhaps the red, the Jingleberry, because I just remember a shirt of my dad's being, he wore a lot of check shirts, especially when he was going to work, and I've ironed a few of them, and apart from the checks and the stripes making my eyes go funny, I do remember that the dark blue and the red is just a really popular, really smart colour. So I'm hoping I can actually recreate that in a form onto the page here. And this Jingleberry is a really nice red to be able to do that. And I think that will really match nicely with the Deep Ocean. So here goes. So we are now using the layering twisted stripes. Now this is a set of 5 stencils. You may have this in your stash, but perhaps forgotten how to use this. And I'm just going to remove that slide. So we've got the full set. There we are. Now this is a set of stencils that doesn't necessarily look the way that it looks on the packaging. So you can have complete free reign on how to use this, and you don't have to use all of the stencils to create the image. I didn't, because each of these stencils will create a column of colour, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns of colour the majority of the time. And each of these columns, as you go through each of the stencils, changes in size. They gradually get smaller and smaller, or thinner and thinner. And the idea is that you build up this check. Now, I'm not going to use the first of the stencils because that check or that column of colour will be a little bit too large, particularly on, for me, making a smaller card. If you're making a 6x6 card, then this in comparison will look fine. So I'm not going to use that because I think that would be too much of a chunk of colour to actually start with. But I will start using stencil number 2. And you'll see what I mean about this in a bit. So I'm coming in with the Deep Ocean to start with. So I'm hoping you're all with me on this one. Let's bring your chat back in. Candles. Is that you imagining the pencils to be candles? I think that would work really well as well, wouldn't it? Right. So Deep Ocean, I'm using a large stencil brush. I want to cover a lot of area quite quickly, but I'm just going to go really pale with this to start with. So I'm only being really gentle by adding the Deep Ocean colour. Now the Deep Ocean is a really bold colour when you put it on quite intensely, which I will work up to. So I'm being really gentle with the amount of colour that I'm putting on. I'm being quite gentle in actually applying this because of the nature of the stencils. There will be a lot of movement in them, so you might actually find it better to tape them down. I'm just holding them down and stenciling between my fingers, if you can see what I'm doing. I'm holding it taut like so, and then stenciling in between and just going that way. But absolutely you can tape them down, and that will make it make them a lot easier to use, because you don't want too much movement of these stripes, because obviously we want to keep nice and sharp. We want the lines between each of these stripes to be quite sharp. So as I say, I'm not too worried about putting too much colour on at this stage. I'm not too worried about it being an absolutely perfect blend, because we're working up into something different, and it does actually all tie in together towards the end. So I'm just being really gentle with this first layer of colour. So I'm going to leave it at that, and you can see already that we do have those stripes. Now the next layer of colour, we are going in between those stripes, but I want to keep a fair amount of white. So let me see, what am I going to do? Now I'm going to come in again, actually with the blue, I'm going to do exactly the same. And just go that tiny little bit darker with this deep ocean blue. And go all across. So I will try and speed up a little bit. And if you're going to make this, then I would suggest doing the whole of the 6x6 size if you're to make this card, because you do actually use pretty much the whole area that you've stenciled to create even all the extra bits as well. So I'll show you how that's broken down in a moment. So I'm just going to go down and just going to try and make this that little bit darker. Not too much, because I don't want, you know, because we're going to come in with something a little bit darker again in a second when we come in with the thinner stripes again. So I'm just going to add all that colour where I can. Now you'll see me putting my whole hand down here. That's just to keep the stencil nice and stable. As I say, what you could probably, the best thing to do is actually tape that down so it doesn't move anywhere. So I'll just make sure I have all of that colour there. Right, so already you can see that this shirt is going to look totally different to the one that I've done here, but that's good. That's good. That's what I've been looking for. Right, now this stencil is going to be sitting on top of another colour. So here I'm going to change from my big brush and come in with the smaller stencil brush, so I can actually add a good amount of colour like this. So I'm going to do this quickly. Okay, and I think what I might do, I'm going to alternate the stripes with the colours, because what I might want to do is actually add a red stripe in between the blue ones there. So I'm just going to do all the blue first. I'm going to alternate the stripes. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3 red and 3 blue, hopefully. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to do these blues first. I'm just going to have a little look. Yeah, have a little look. Just check that what I think was going to work would actually work. And then I'm going to come in with red. Like so. Because I don't want red to be the overriding colour, but as I say, the blue and red on a check shirt, there's just something about it when you put a blue tie on with it, it just looks really smart. It's just something that I remember Dad dressing in his work days. I think that's the idea of him putting a suit on now, it really isn't. But he spent lots of time working in a suit. It's one of those things I remember when I was little. I think he was glad when he retired and he didn't have to wear a suit again daily. So I'll just put this red on like so. Again, if you have more time, you'd make sure that you'd put the ink down perhaps a little bit smoother and get a really nice fine blend on that, like I would do on other floral ones. But I just want to give you the idea of building up these patterns. Okay, so we have the red and blue going on there. So again, yeah, that looks totally different already, doesn't it? Now what I'm going to do, I've got stencil number 5 here. And I'm going to do something a little bit different with this layer. This is where I'm going to bring in the fine liner pens. And I used a blue one on this card, but I think what I might do, I'm going to use red on this particular one. And you won't be able to see it when that's on the page. Let me get a dark piece of card. Let's pick this up. Okay, so let me just show you against here. You'll see that this is the thinnest of the columns of colour on this particular stencil. And with the pen, I'm not going to fill in that whole column, but I'm just going to draw a line on the right down the right hand edge of each of these columns. Now, it doesn't have to be the right hand, you could do the left, as long as you're consistent as you go all the way along. So I'm just going to use this and the stencil just to trace a line down through that aperture, as opposed to filling in the whole aperture with colour. Now for this, I'm just going to turn this around and I'm going to bring in a ruler. Now this isn't for any other reason than to just keep my stencil steady. Okay, so I'm not putting it, I'm just holding it across, but I'm putting my pen into the stencil line and just drawing that as we go along. So I don't know if I can perhaps zoom in just a tiny little bit without going too blurred to you. So then I'm just going to move my ruler along again. Again, it's just to keep the stencil steady, and I'm going to draw another line down the same position, so on the right hand side, or the bottom line along that aperture, and I'm just going to carry along all the way down the stencil and just create those lines. Now you will in a second be I will be turning the paper around, or the cardstock around, that I've stenciled on. So you do perhaps need to just remember which of the stencils you've used to create these lines. So I'm using the last stencil. So when I take that away, and I'm just going to, so I'm going to put that back round the way that I was before, and I take that away. Now I'm going to move this because I am going to turn it around. If I can just lift, right. Bear with me 2 ticks, it will go black just for a second. And this is just so as I can focus in. I'm not quite sure how else to do that, but it just enables you to see the line that I've drawn, and that just brings in that extra little bit of red, and I think it's just a really nice design point when you're creating a shirt. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go back to the beginning and do exactly the same, but I'm going to give my cardstock a quarter turn. So, and just line up those stencils with the cardstock again. And I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm not going to use stencil number 1. I'm going to start on stencil number 2. And I'm going to create exactly the same pattern as we did before. So I'm going to come in really gently with the deep ocean, just to create those cross hatches. So we're going to end up with a nice checked shirt. Now you can just alter the pattern a little bit. You know how it's really nice when you look at kilts and how plaid patterns work. They're not always the same each direction. So you can again have some fun with how this is built up. Now I do want to keep quite a bit of the white with this shirt. But hopefully now, if you've had this set of stencils in your stash and you've forgotten how to use it, hopefully that's sort of jogged your memory and it's given you a few ideas on how you can use this. Now as I say, I'm going quite light with the colourings on here. You can go a lot bolder, but you can start seeing now that we have the check just building up. So I think what I might do, I might leave that one because I do want to keep quite a lot of the white, but I'm going to go directly to this one so we can bring in those red stripes along this way. I do want to keep a lot of that white in the background, I think. But I'm just following the ink that I've used on the stencil before, so you can see what positions I used the red in, so we know we're going to get some nice sort of geometric and nice squares of colour once I've stenciled this red in. Okay. And again, this is ideal for a man's card, it really is, but there's nothing to say that you can't make it feminine just by changing the colours. And perhaps even changing the patterns, perhaps just use the finer of the stripes here as well. That would give it a lot finer look. If you perhaps just use the finer squares and not the thicker ones, then you'd end up with a lot more sort of white space, or the colour of the card underneath would show through a lot more. Again, there's lots of different combinations, and I think it's one of those things, the more that you play with it, the more that you'll see what the possibilities are. So I'm just going to do this quickly for you. I'm just saying I'm aware of the time. I mean, what the card actually comes together really quite quickly once you've done the stenciling. Now, if you don't have these stencils, of course, but you do have design papers, you can still create this card. You wouldn't need to be creating or doing the stenciling to create the paper, but the actual construction of the card will still be exactly the same. The dimensions of the cardstock that you're using would be the same. So we can see that really come together, and this is where we can add the stripes with the red. So I'm just going to go along and do that quickly. I'm just using my hand just to stabilize that stencil again instead of the ruler this time. I'm using the same positioning as I did on the first time round. Now I will use the ruler on this one actually, because the edge of this stencil is really quite slim and will have a mind of its own. Okay. So we've done the same on both sides. Let's put that in there. So we have a really nice checked shirt going on there with the slim lines going in between. Now I've used red. You could easily come in and do a separate colour with a separate line with the blue. Again, it really is just interpretation, and just have a play with it. Right, so now we can think about bringing our card together. So we have our card base, which, as I say, is an A6 card. So we need to trim this down to size. Now, so the way that I usually do this, to be honest with you, is I just eyeball it with probably 0.5 centimetre or 5 millimeters, and just make the marks, which then I use to go to the trim and just cut that to size. Let's just move those inks out of the way. So I think it works out about 10 centimetres in width. And I think it was about 14.2 millimeters, wasn't it, in height? I think that was the measurements I said for this layer. Now, what you do want to do is you don't need the thin part there, but you will need to keep this section. So we can add our layer onto our card base. Again, quite straightforward, and I'm actually really pleased that this looks really different. You can create like a whole wardrobe of shirt cards that you could put a happy birthday, or you could leave without a sentiment on, and they're ready to use for anyone. So imagine some of the fun you could have perhaps with purple and orange shirts, you know, something out of the psychedelic, out of the 60s or the 70s would be quite fun to do, wouldn't it? Okay, so we have that on our card blank. Now what we need to do, I'm just actually going to trim this down again. I'm just going to take off the waste from the side there, so we have a completely usable part. Yeah, we don't need that waste off the side, so we have a nice piece there that we are ready to use. Now I don't need to adjust the width of that at all. So where I let me bring up the slide again. So where I say the collar, you need a piece which is like 5.2 centimeters by 8 centimeters. What I would suggest you do, unless you were to stencil this again separately, is to measure that rectangle out on your cardstock first, okay, and just mark that and just perhaps put a line across the cardstock there before you cut it. And I'll show you why in a second, because we need to be able to cut a pocket from this piece as well as create the collar. So to create the pocket, I'm coming to my pocket builder. Now, because I'm using or creating the small card, an A6 card, the smallest pocket on here is the one that fits the best. So before I cut this piece, I just want to make sure that I've got enough left for me to cut my pocket out of, which is fine. So this is the area that I've earmarked for the collar. Now, before I do any cutting, what I want to do is to line up. Now, I'll show you this. This collar is going to be sitting at the top here. I need to tilt it a little bit, obviously, because collars don't go straight across. We need to tilt it across. Now, this corner here, I'm going to marry up to the corner of the layer just here. Okay, and I'm going to hold that in place. And I'm then going to just pivot this piece of card until it meets that corner of the layer on this side. Okay, and that is the angle of your collar. What you then do, you take a ruler. We could have done this before we plopped it down, actually. So what we can do is actually mark this corner here, then mark on the collar where it meets the corner of the layer. So we have a mark here and we have a mark here, which when we join those two up, that will give us the triangle for our collar. Now you can't actually see that. Let me make that a lot darker for you. Okay. There we are. So you can see the collar, the top of the collar here, that will be going straight across and sit on top of our layer here. Now, if you wanted to create this and just measure all of this out, what I would suggest you do, you create a rectangle, the height of the same width of this top here, and then you cut it in half, if that makes sense. So we would cut our rectangle, which is the measurements that I gave you before. That is the rectangle. Then we would need to cut that directly in half. And that's what gives us the collar. And basically you're getting two collars from this. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So we end up with two collars. So you would actually be able to make two cards out of this. So we can choose which of the collars that we use. Doesn't really matter. And at this stage, it doesn't matter now that it doesn't follow the rest of the pattern. That's this now starts to become a shirt and look far more authentic. So this is how you would arrange that on top of the shirt top. Now, before I do that, I'm going to add some buttons. Now, this pocket builder is a fabulous set because we actually have a die for the buttons here. See this die here? And all I've done before I came live to you, I die cut 7 of those buttons from the same cardstock as that I've stenciled onto here. Now, you could use real buttons, you could use contrasting buttons. It's entirely up to you. There's again, this is where you can have a little bit of fun and go to town and just sort of use your imagination. Now, I've just turned all of them over. Oh, I've got a croaky throat now. So all I'm going to do, actually, I'm just going to add some glue to each of these buttons, and then I'll add them onto the card. Now, I've found it better to add the buttons on first. So we'd add the first button in possibly to the eye centrally, then I do top and bottom. So we're actually adding 5 buttons along the shirt center there, and then we could fill in the center ones like so. We have 1 button that then sits in the corner of the collar like that. And now we can actually add our collar to the card. So line up the layer corner to corner, and we have our basic shirt collar card like that. So again, even that in itself would be perfect. You could just add a sentiment there if you wanted to. But of course, we need to just finish this off with a pocket. So I've got the little bit extra that I've got here, and that just about fits my die, my small pocket die there. So I can use, actually, I think, my small die cutting machine to do this. That fits on perfectly. So these pocket builders, the nested pocket builder dies, again, can be used in so many different ways. It's going to be one of those ones that you reach for, along with the pencils, I think, that you're just going to find so many different uses for. And if you're perhaps stuck with just perhaps the theme for a card, it's just a really nice set to reach for. So we have our lovely little pocket, which can sit on the front of the card there. Now, before the glue dries, I've also got my little button, which I can add to this pocket here. Again, just to keep the theme of the rest of the card. Now, I can bring in my pencils. Now, what I want to do is need to trim these down. And I think I might use the one with the red in, actually, just to be a little bit different. So I trim between the pencils, and they will sit in the pocket of the card like that. So it's really nice, actually. I've done this one in red, and we've got the red on the card, so that sort of fits the theme really nicely, I think. And we can just arrange that like so. And the way that I would do this is I'll put the glue on the back of the pocket first, and actually glue the pencils to the pocket first. Now, you can then add these with 3D foam if you wanted. You just have to be a little bit mindful of the clearance of the pencils and the collar, I think. But I'm just going to add those together like that, and then I'm just going to shape. I'm going to shape that pocket just a little bit. I'm not going to use 3D foam. Just a little bit of glue spilling out there. I'm not going to use 3D foam, but I will just add some glue around the edges of the pocket like that. And just while that's shaped a little bit, that just gives you that little bit of dimension that sits, that pocket can hold there, like so. So the card itself comes together so quickly. If you didn't have the pencil die set, I mean, this could be a nice little set that you could make this card. You could perhaps put a little note, a little gift tag or something, little voucher as a little gift for the card. Pop that in the pocket also. So from the sentiment set that we have here, it gives you a lovely sentiment just to sit on the front there as well. To close up the door. So there we are. So it's a really nice set, a really unusual card to make. Say perfect for the guys. You can make so many different variations of this, and they can all look different. I think even if you use the same color twice, you'd end up making quite different cards each time as well. But they're really nice cards to have sitting in your stash, and it's a really nice use of the these brand new pencil collection as well. So among other ideas, I mean, look on the Facebook group, there is actually an album of all the design team makes, and all the pencil samples will be sitting in there as well, as is there an album for pretty much most of the collections, particularly the ones that are come, you know, the newest ones. We're trying to make the effort to make those accessible for you as well. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a different idea on how to use those collections, and also revisit those old products also. I'll leave that with you for today. I'll be back with you next week. Remember, Lisa will be live on Friday, and then hopefully you can all join at next is it next Monday? It's the 30th that she makes her debut on Hobby Maker, isn't it? So that'll be really exciting. I think she's really looking forward to get that going, and there's lots of new products going on there as well. So keep a lookout on the Facebook group as well. The design team will also be sharing their samples for that too. So thanks so much for joining me today, and I shall see you all again next week. Take care.